Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com, and what a year 2022 was for me from a photographic standpoint. In 2022, photography took me all across the United States, from Portland, Maine to San Diego, California, and many places in between. I found myself in dimly lit bowling alleys watching pro bowlers compete for $100,000, to standing in front of 55,000 screaming fans at a Poison concert, to watching a $4 billion rocket launch, as well as being in the middle of the Philadelphia Phillies dogpile as they celebrated heading to the World Series. To say that 2022 was an action-packed year for personal photo shoots would be an understatement. Now, before I dive deeper into my favorite images and shoots of 2022, let me pull back the curtain on the how and why I ended up finding myself in the positions I ended up in 2022. The how: Instagram. But Jared, Instagram hates photographers. Well, regardless of how you feel about Instagram, that little check mark I have next to my name, well, that helps me move to the top of someone's inbox. Now, don't get me wrong. It hasn't always been that way, and it's not the only way that I make connections. So if you don't have a blue check mark, don't get discouraged. You can still find a way. Instagram has allowed me to make connections with people that I never would have been able to connect with in the past. And those connections, well, they've led me to some of the biggest shoots that I did in 2022. But more importantly than the how is the why. Why did I end up telling these photo stories in 2022? The truth is, I needed something else to focus on other than being in the studio. You see, I've got Steven and Dan working hard back at home on new videos. The way it works is Steven and I film videos together, things like comparisons or real-world reviews or scripted videos like this one, and then someone has to edit them. It's not just shoot, 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 because if all we did was just shoot videos, we would never get anything out into the world. But the rub here is, while the guys are both busy editing different projects at the same time, I'm usually in the studio twiddling my thumbs. Well, not exactly twiddling my thumbs. I'm working on videos I can do on my own, like photo news fix or critiques or doing mentorships or research for future videos. Sometimes I'm left to my own devices for 3, 4, 5, or even more days, and at that point I start to go stir crazy. I bother Steven and I ask him what should I be doing, even though I have plenty I could be doing, but don't feel like actually doing, until he finally got to the point where he said, "You should do your thing. You should go do shoots, travel somewhere. This is why you have us, to free you up to go do other things." And those other things, besides leaving Steven and Dan alone to focus on what they need to focus on, are my photo stories. Now back to Instagram and how my first photo story from 2022 came about. You see, there's this professional bowler who goes by the name of Kyle Troop. He also so happens to have an afro. 1, I love bowling, and 2, I had the fro first. Back in August of 2021, I dropped Kyle a random message on Instagram to see if I could make contact, and within 12 hours, I had a message back. But guess what I didn't do with my next message? I didn't ask him for something. I started a conversation. I started to become friends with Kyle. And it wasn't until 5 months later in January, when the PBA tour started up again, that I finally made an actual ask. And less than a month later, I flew out to Detroit to capture Kyle Troop's photo story at a professional bowling event. What originally started out as spending a day or two photographing Kyle in Detroit led me to popping out every other week to the next event in the next city, month after month. I was able to capture Jason Belmonte's photo story both on and off the lanes, as well as befriended everyone on the tour. Usually, I want to cut my trips a day or two short, but this time around, the bowlers made me feel at home. They made me feel a part of the team, which really made me feel accomplished, accepted, as well as relaxed. Now, I hope to continue sharing their stories well into the future. Next up, Poison. It's not often you find yourself on stage in front of 55,000 screaming fans trying to get the photo, but that's what ended up happening when I photographed Poison in 2022. But how I ended up on stage is a completely different story. You see, you never know who's watching your content. And it turns out that Poison's drummer Ricky Rocket watched my YouTube videos. He commented on one, I commented back with my email address, we struck up a friendship, and you fast forward 2 years, and I'm getting picked up in a golf cart by Ricky Rocket to head backstage to meet the rest of the band. Did I mention this was the first time that we've ever met in person? So here I was sitting backstage outside of Poison's dressing room listening to Ricky tell the guys in the band that I'm the guy that he's been telling them about. He vouched for me with his bandmates. Even though we've never met in person, he believed in my work so much that he went to bat for me. Now that's a pretty strong endorsement. It also set some expectations before I ever took a photo, which meant I needed to deliver. Now, did I feel any added pressure knowing that he vouched for me? I'd say no more than the pressure that I normally put on myself, but it certainly was a passing thought in my mind up until the point that I started to focus and do what I do best, which is capture the photo story. Backstage, on stage, in front of the stage, and finally dead smack center stage. This was an awesome experience and some awesome images, if I might say so myself. Now here's a short that the team put together showing how I captured that final image of Bret Michaels coming up and punching towards the camera.
This is a moment frozen in time. For as frozen as this moment seems, the reality is, it was here and gone in 1/2500th of a second. Yup. It happens that fast. But the funny thing is, I almost wasn't in position to get the shot. You see, I was just about to walk off stage when I glanced back, saw Bret alone on the catwalk, and made the split-second decision to wait just a few seconds longer. Do I hear the 55,000 people screaming? No, I'm locked in. As soon as Bret started walking towards me, I got down in my shooting position, grabbed my focus, and reacted. Now this moment is forever frozen in time.
This has been a FroKnowsPhoto short. Please subscribe.
Next up, Major League Baseball.
Could it be? Could it be? It is out of here!
Now I'm sure some of you are tired of seeing my baseball photos, but having the golden ticket, aka a photo pass that gets me into every single game in every stadium for 2022, well, that was kind of insane. Baseball was the perfect backdrop for me to test out dozens of cameras and lenses for the YouTube channel. Though I didn't go to a lot of stadiums in 2022, I did head out to Chicago to shoot 2 games at Wrigley Field. There, I was able to not only capture a great photo story, as well as hang out with Manny Ortiz, I also got to meet and converse with a lot of local Chicago photographers. And that honestly was the best part about traveling in 2022, was encountering so many other photographers. Now back to baseball. Against all odds, the Phillies clinched a playoff berth for the first time in 11 years. Though unfortunately, my all-access pass was only good for the regular season, but I was promised that if the Phillies won their series, the first series, that I would get a pass. Lo and behold, the Phillies pulled out a victory in the first round, which meant home games in round 2. And true to what I was told, my pass was approved and I was going to shoot the playoffs. Guess what? The Phillies took games 3 and 4 at home to win the series, and I got to run out on the field and join in on the celebration. At that point, I didn't know if my playoff run would be over or if I would be approved for the next round. I got approved, and once again, the Phillies pulled out the wins to clinch a trip to the World Series, and I got to run on the field once again. At this point, after being approved for the last 2 rounds, I kind of had a good feeling that I would get to shoot the World Series, and once again, I got approved. Now, if you told me at the start of the season that I would be shooting the World Series, I wouldn't have believed you. But here I was, shooting alongside some of the best sports photographers in the world. Now, my hope was for the Phillies to win the World Series, run out on the field, and not only take pictures, but maybe, just maybe, be immortalized in the background of the celebration for the rest of time. You know, only for the Phillies people to care about. Unfortunately, it wasn't to be this year, but I am thankful for the experience and images that I was able to capture. Here's a quick look back at some of my favorite images from the Philadelphia Phillies playoff run. Let me cut in here real quick and let you know that this video is brought to you by Squarespace. Now, if you're looking to build your very own online portfolio, use what I've been using for my personal website at jaredpolin.com for well over 10 years.
10 years!
Because it's simple, easy, affordable, and you don't need to know any coding. To get your 14-day free trial, head on over to squarespace.com/FroKnowsPhoto. If you decide that it's for you, use the code FroKnowsPhoto at checkout to get 10% off your first order. Now, let's get back to the video. And finally, Artemis. After 2 prior failed launches, I made the decision to fly back down to Cape Canaveral for less than a day in the hopes that the most powerful rocket in the world, standing 322 feet tall and packing 8.8 million pounds of thrust, would finally lift off. And it did. It finally lifted off at 1:47 and 44 seconds in the morning. The candle was finally lit, and Artemis 1 was on its way to the moon.
And liftoff of Artemis 1. We rise together, back to the moon and beyond.
And I had about 7 seconds before it cleared the tower in the pitch black night sky to actually get a photo. And the good news is, I had 4 cameras firing. There was the Insta360 1-inch, an R3 with a 400-2.8, an R5 with a 70-200, and a handheld R3 with a 600 f4. Though I didn't get a ton of keepers, all I really needed was that one shot. And this is that shot. And I call that a success. Look, 2022 was really good from a photographic standpoint for me, but most of it would not have been possible if I didn't put myself out there, if I didn't take some calculated risks, if I didn't cultivate relationships, if I didn't simply try, learn, grow, and do. Yes, do. You see, you never know who you'll meet along the way. You never know where photography will take you and what you'll end up capturing unless you actually get out there and do. So if you take anything from this video, it's to just do. Get out there and shoot. Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com. See ya.